we ask for your comfort, for your guidance, and your direction. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, we're into the 5th session here. And let's start out again. This is where Jacob gets pursued by Laban. He was up in the north. He was really went through northern Israel to what we today consider Syria. And it's called Aram is another word for it, Aramaic at the time. But it's Aram, Syria area. And that's where he's at. And he decides to leave. And of course Laban takes after him. And during that he ends up having a wrestling match with God. So that's our topics for today. But before we go there, a little recap. And what I thought I'd take us through a little bit is to bore you with a little genealogy, because it's a good time for a little review of all that's transpired. This is genealogy related, by the way, to Jacob. But we're going to go back in time and try to connect the dots back to Abraham. So if you look here on the left-hand side is Abraham's family tree. So you can see at the very top we have Adam and Eve, and then Seth. Remember, they had Cain, Abel, and then after Cain and Abel, Seth. And through Seth is where Noah came from. So Noah came on the lineage of Seth. Noah then had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the ones highlighted in white that you can see, Shem, it's hard, you probably can't see this. So Adam's here, Seth is here, Noah's here, Shem, and then from Shem comes Terah, Abraham's dad. So that's where we get Terah. And you remember our discussions in a few sessions back about Ham had looked upon Noah when he was naked, and he was cursed. And from him came the Canaanites, who always became a challenge for Israel, but it came through the descendants of Ham. But from Shem, from Noah to Shem, to Terah, to Abraham, and remember Ishmael and Isaac, and the confrontation between Haggai, the concubine of Abraham, Sarah, their slave, had born Ishmael, because Sarah didn't necessarily at the time trust that maybe God was really going to give her a son, and she was entering into late years of life. And so she then encouraged Haggai to have relations with Abraham, and they bore Ishmael. But then after they had him, and she bore a son, she had a little jealousy erupt, and she sent her on her way. So Haggai was sent away along with Ishmael, and they're believed to be the origin of the Arabs. That's what's thought to be that particular lineage. So through Isaac, we then have Jacob and Esau. You're aware of that family conflict. And then from Jacob, we have the 12 tribes of Israel. And then to the New Testament, we have the 12 disciples. But the 12 tribes of Israel coming from Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. And on this other side over here, you can see this is just breaking down just Abraham's family tree, not going way back in time. And you can see Abraham and Sarah having Isaac, and Isaac through Rebekah having Jacob. And then Jacob through Leah and Rachel having the trade, 12 patriarchs, plus Dinah. So that was the children. And what's phenomenal is how God blesses Leah and Rachel. Now, do any of you recall, by any chance, what was significant in terms of the children that happened to be born by Leah, how God blessed her? There were 2 really significant ones that formed tribes.
Levi?
Yes. Levi and Judah, correct. So Levi, anybody recall, not to put you to a confirmation test here, but Levi's were the priests. And if you notice at the land here behind me, that there's no place that says Levi. So when the land was divided up in Israel, and they took Canaan and divided it all up, the Levites were to basically be present in all the land because they served as the priests. So they inherited no land, but they were dispersed throughout. And this is showing the full 12 tribes. And you may recall that this is Rachel and Leah, that Joseph here, who was born to Rachel and then Benjamin, Joseph's kids are the grandkids of Jacob, received a special blessing. They were blessed first. And yes, they were Egyptian, but Jacob basically took them in as his grandkids.
Well, didn't he took them as his own kids?
As his own kids, yes. I'm sorry, I said his grandkids. They were his grandkids, but as his own kids.
Because
he basically,
they got the blessing. Joseph didn't get any land, but he got the land through his sons.
that's correct. There wasn't really a tribe of Joseph. The Bible refers to the house of Joseph, but it went to the kids, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Ephraim was the youngest, and Manasseh was the eldest. And does the inheritance normally go to? The oldest. And we saw that got changed, didn't it, when we had Jacob and Esau. Remember Jacob the deceiver by name? Went in, put on the hairy garments, put on the gloves and all that, and put on Esau's clothes, and Isaac, being poor of sight, just fell and obviously gave the blessing to him. But Isaac also realized that that was God's plan. So here we go again, and Joseph is standing here with his two kids. He's saying, Dad, this, you put the hand on the wrong child. The right hand goes on the one that is to inherit the blessing to the oldest. So here in the photo, you'll see we'll get that into our text in a later session, but he crosses his hands. So he puts his right hand on the youngest and his left hand on the oldest, and says, the youngest actually shall be the greater. Both are going to get blessings. So little Ephraim here, so Manasseh was the oldest, Ephraim the youngest. And you can see has less territory here, and yet they have some real key cities. They have Shiloh, Bethel where Jacob had the vision of the ladder.
Is there a well there?
And there's a well there. And anyway, these were considered holy spots, and Benjamin has Jerusalem, Joseph's brother. He got land. So he has a holy city, and Benjamin and Judah sort of stayed together when southern Israel split from northern Israel, when there was a divided kingdom. And anyway, in the divided kingdom, why I'm bringing up Ephraim, just for purposes of interest, is that he was the youngest, but out of him came the first king of the northern kingdom, which was called Israel. So anyway, some notables here. We already talked about the priesthood of Levi, and also, you probably remember that Aaron and Moses came from the tribe of Levi, as notables. Our son Judah, King David and Christ, came from the tribe of Judah. Rehoboam was the first king of the southern kingdom. So Judah, when the kingdom divided, the northern here all revolted against the southern. And they got some of the better land, but anyway, we know what happened. The Assyrians came down and scattered them all. So that's the history of the lost 10 tribes. When the Assyrians came down, grabbed them, scattered them all over, and then repopulated. Remember, we talked about that in here, sort of the land of Samaria, because then the Assyrians sent back intermarried individuals, and they were always downcast, looked downcast upon by those that were in Judah and Jerusalem. So a lot of history there, but food for thought. But Ephraim was where actually the king of the south came from. That was Jeroboam the first. And I don't know why I put, Ephraim, the northern kingdom, pardon me. Yeah, because Ephraim split up and went north. Benjamin stayed with Judah in the south. And we also have, let's see, Benjamin, Saul came from Benjamin. And what was the other one that used to be named Saul? Apostle Paul. So they were both from the tribe of Benjamin. So anyway, just points of information. Now, when we go into other nations, as I mentioned earlier, we think that the Arabs likely came through Ishmael, through his lineage. The Arameans, up in this section up here, Syrians, came likely from Laban's descendants, in his lineage. Lot, remember, was the nephew of Abraham. He actually bore the Ammonites and the Moabites through his project. And they're sitting right over here. I'm only pointing this out just because these are always they've been a little bit of stinkers for the children of Israel in here. This is showing the divided kingdom where Judah was down here, and Israel was called the northern kingdom. Obviously, under King David, this was all called Israel. But the Ammonites, and the Moabites, and then Edomites. And who formed the Edomites? Esau. Yeah, very good. So, a little review of all that. Now we're in the chapter. Any questions on that genealogy? It's a tad boring, just to connect the dots on of some of the nations formed. So I find it interesting. Okay, need two volunteers to please read chapter 31.
And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob had taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's had begotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers and to the kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. And if he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle that are speckled. And if he said thus, the ring straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straight. Thus God has taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring straight, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring straight, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest the vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of the kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's now, that whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan.
That's fine. No, that's a lot of reading. We'll end up having more than two because this is long. Go ahead.
That sounds like this.
Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him, and pursued him for 7 days, and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night, and said to him, Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What have you done, that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me, and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre? Why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away, because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your God shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours, and take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the 2 female servants. But he did not find them. And he went out Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods, and what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was, by day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. 20 years I've been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night.
Thank you, Ann. Could someone then take and fly us home for the rest of the chapter? It's a lot of reading.
Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day with these my daughters over the children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Begersut, but not Tufa.
We'll take that.
Okay. But Jacob called it Eli. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." Therefore he named it Eli. And Mizpah, for he said, "The Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." Then Laban said to Jacob, "See this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed to return home.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, that was a lot to get through. Thank you, all 3 of you, John, Ann, and Joe. So, some questions here. What are 2 reasons that you can think of that Jacob left Laban?
So I started.
Yeah, he was a little sick of it, wasn't he? After 20-odd years there, and having his wages readjusted, how many times?
10.
10 times, yeah, wage adjustment. And probably not in the right direction, right? So, I mean, he was just infuriated. And then he had another reason.
He thought they would take his daughters back, or his daughters, and Jacob's wives.
Yes, well, that's true. That would be one. And then there's a divine one, which is God gave him direction to go into Canaan. So what is Jacob's communication to his wives and their response? If you look at 31 and 31:16, it somewhat summarizes that Jacob actually has a sit-down session. We might call it a huddle today, a gathering together with his wives, and he sort of shares what he's planning to do. And what does that sort of say about his role as a husband?
also listen to what his wife said.
Right.
What did he say?
He said that, John said that he is the head of the house. It does show that he indeed is the head of the household. He called the meeting. However, it wasn't an autocratic approach. He listened to his wife's response. He was looking for unanimity, for alignment, because they were being asked to leave their dad, and sort of agree that, you know, his dad was a bit of a stinker here, a bit of a trickster. So I thought it was rather impressive that he's having a joint discussion, and it's not just autocratic just because he happened to be head of the household. Where did the Lord command Jacob to go? Well, I guess we know where he's commanding him to go. Consider Laban's reaction to Jacob's flight. So God spoke to Laban in a dream. How compliant was Laban? What's that?
He invited by the way.
Yeah, he did in part, and he was a little bit, he slipped a little bit in terms of, he wasn't supposed to say anything good or bad, but he did have a little hard time.
That's the truth.
Yeah, he had a little hard time, you know, not saying, you know, you're really irritated me sneaking off like this. You know, so he did temper it though, and he certainly didn't attack and destroy. So in that respect, now you're right, that he was compliant. But he was a little bit of a pain, you know, and he was obviously challenging. He noticed that he was missing gods, and we're going to go to that next. And what do you think those gods were? I mean,
Idols.
yeah, they could have been.
Why would she steal them?
That's what we want to talk about now. Well, what are your thoughts?
Well, she's not sharing it with anybody, so how can she like sell it for money, or she did it on the slide?
Yeah, this would be really almost impossible for you to know unless you heard about some recent evidence. There's a little clue in 30:27. Can someone read 30:27? There's a little hint of one reason, possibly.
But Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, please say, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. He added, name your wages and I will pay them.
So one theory that's out there, to get at your question, which is a valid one, is why did you even take them? One is that if Laban was using this for divinization, or, you know, foretelling, you know, like looking at the gods and getting a sense that, oh, you're supposed to be here serving me. Rachel may have thought that if we take these gods, Laban's not going to know where we're actually running to, you know, and trying to use them for divinization. So that was one. Another one is what I have up on the slide, and that's some recent archaeological evidence that where they found these idols, they found that there was a historical pattern at that time where when if your idols got passed on, that's like passing on the inheritance. There was supposed to be sort of a passing on like that. That meant you're going to get the inheritance. And what did our text say about Rachel's feelings regarding not getting any inheritance? If you recall in the readings.
Well, she said
14 and 15.
What are we to our father? He's taken away.
Yeah. Yeah, what inheritance has he given us? Nothing. He's taken everything. You know, and everything that Jacob got, he's earned by God's grace. So part of it was this thought that if you took the idols, you should be getting some inheritance. So if you haven't given it to me now, I'm taking away what I'm supposed to validate that I got, like a contract, you know, like a will. So anyway, that was part of the archaeological evidence that is pointing. So those are two potential reasons. One, divinization, yes.
With what they're talking about, hearing God talk to Laban and everything, it seems, were they kind of like a hybrid of worshiping the true God, or was it just they were worshiping any God? And he talks about hearing God telling them to leave Jacob alone.
Right. It appears to be John the Common Bladder, that they were saying, you know, we're gonna worship God, the true God, but just in case, you know, let's throw in a few of these other gods. Can it really hurt? You know, maybe I'll use them for fortune telling, and just in case. Yes, Joe.
But wouldn't it also bring into question Rachel's faith in the Lord? Because Jacob had just finished testifying about all the blessings, how the Lord had provided to him through the different flocks and herds and everything, and he's demonstrating pretty much a full-out trust in God. And now she's throwing the left turn and saying, well, wait, this might not be enough. What about my inheritance? Well, should her inheritance matter at this point?
Right. You're spot on. Of course it does. It shows just like every person in the Bible, the frailty. So she just got done with the talk from Jacob, and the acknowledgement that, yeah, we've been blessed in spite of all this. But just in case, yes, it shows a lack of trust. That's exactly right, Joe.
That's what she had been raised with.
Pardon?
That's what she had been raised with under her father.
You are correct.
That, this is how you do things, and this is our lucky rabbit's foot over here. And,
That's right.
You rub the rabbit's foot, and things will go good for you, and, so I'm going to take that along.
Yeah, so I'm sure there was a cultural carryover. And there's a bit of doubt and it's, maybe I should do both. And again, it's a little bit like taking a will with you, in a way, in that point in time. So yeah, there's probably a little bit of all of the above. But certainly, it's not full confidence in God. Let's see. Any other comments or questions on that? So what do you think about, I think I know what you're going to think about Jacob's case to Laban, when he fires back. First he was irritated. Now, Rachel could have been in a world of hurt, couldn't she? Because Jacob just got done saying, whoever has something like this, we didn't steal that, we'll kill him. They'll be executed. But then, Rachel says that she's having her menstrual period, so Laban leaves her alone. That's why I can't get up. She's sitting on the saddle containing the idols. But what do you think then later of Jacob's case to Laban? Pretty well lays it on the line, doesn't it? And this is 36 to 55, so it's a fairly long spiel there if you glance at it.
What God said.
Yeah. He says, you've been through everything. What, have you ever found anything? I've done everything to try to help you be a success. I haven't stolen any of your lambs. You haven't had a miscarriage, so things have been good for you. I took the spotted, the ones you didn't want, and God blessed them and gave me, great means. But so yeah, he had a pretty solid defense, right, against being used, and then the change in wages. It was probably a good catharsis finally for Jacob, who had to put in all those years of servitude. It also did one other thing. Jacob, remember, starts out as a deceiver, and in part it tends to now point to maybe he's getting a little change in heart and a little increased trust in God, and as the provider, not by his own works of deception. So Jacob, as we know, really prospered. Isaac really prospered under God. Abraham obviously really prospered under God. Yes, they all had trials and tribulations, though, didn't they? Abraham struggled as he was going to get a son. He finally did. Sarah. Isaac almost got slaughtered by Abraham. But Abraham trusted God to the point that he thought, well, even if I kill my son, God can resurrect him. And so that's really having full faith in God. Then we have Jacob, who had to put in all these years of service. He sort of got deceived when he was the deceiver of his own brother to get the inheritance. So inheritance was big. So as we look today and we look at prosperity gospel, I would just like you to discuss with maybe this group over here, this center group, among a few tables. You don't have to get close. Keep your social distancing. And then this section over here. What are your thoughts about prosperity gospel and the message today? Good, bad, and what does it say about suffering? And if you look at the questions while you're meeting, the one I'd really like you to focus on is 2 Corinthians and Paul's comments on the sufferings he endured. And it's sort of the two ends of the stick that we can be given in life. We get blessings, but we get sufferings for Christ's sake. And I'd like to identify how many sufferings that Paul happens to call out. So I'll give you a little bit of time here, a few minutes. So one is to talk about prosperity gospel. Joel Osteen is really excellent to listen to. But I'd like your perspective on what you think is his overall message, and if it's a great message for Christians today. And then talk about Corinthians. Oh, it's 2 Corinthians chapter 11, 22 to 29. So I'm asking you basically to list the sufferings that Paul endured because God chose him. So if you have to, you may do some individual reading and then turn around and try to put together a list as best you can. Second Corinthians 11. Hopefully I listed the right verses there. Okay.
Well, only 39 left. At this time, the 48 left. There was that. Okay.
I guess you could take it almost through 27, but you'll see that whole section there. All sufferings is impossible.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with two tables on the left. Any takeaways? First of all, I'm not here to lambaste Joel Osteen, because I think it's very articulate and it's a good message. I'm sorry, my left. So the tables over here, your thoughts on prosperity gospel?
Be careful what you look for, it may not be what you think.
Yeah. Expound on that, Joel.
Well, so I do believe that in the prosperity gospel, I believe that God does always promise to prosper us, but it may not be the way that we're thinking. And so sometimes He will prosper us by building our character. Our character is the component of suffering that comes in to strengthen faith even.
Did everybody hear that? Yeah, that was well articulated. So, yes, God wants us to prosper, but it may not always be the ways we tend to think of prosperity, which is what? Wealth, health, success, no problems. It isn't necessarily how the plan works. How about from the middle tables? Prosperity gospel?
I think it tends to make people more shallow in what they're looking at, and it's like with the sower and the seeds. The minute troubles come into their life, they say, well, you told me that we would be doing okay if we trusted in God.
Right.
It doesn't make a lasting faith.
Right.
Well, when you have problems, then does that mean your faith isn't strong enough, or God doesn't love you enough, or?
That could be the other negative road if you just heard what Barb said and John, that it can't go down. If something happens to you, well, maybe my faith wasn't, maybe I just didn't do enough, maybe I wasn't strong enough, maybe I wasn't solid enough in my faith. Or why me? And can good things happen to bad people? Yes, great success, great things can. Can bad things happen to good people, Christians? We know that. So yeah, it can really give a mixed message, and it's attractive because we all want to prosper, inherently as humans. But it's a dangerous message at times, if that's all you're fed. And anything from
prosperity gospel, from what I'm understanding, kind of like everybody, Joe, it's more leaned towards the human element, the flesh element. It's, hey, take care of it yourself by doing this, instead of saying, hey, God, help me through this and get me through this. That's kind of I take off of what Joel Osteen is mostly doing as a person. He's saying, instead of up here with God, he's kind of right here with human elements. And he hits those notes more than anything, rather than God's elements and how he wants us to be.
And I just wanted to talk about it because we're all exposed to Joel Osteen and his ministry, and there are obviously good things about it, but it's to be able to talk with others about, potential problems of always talking about the prosperity gospel, or that everything's here for our benefit, and putting that more in the human terms of benefit, as Joel brought up. So let's now go to the sufferings of Paul. Can you name one or two? What was that?
I have 19 things.
19. Okay, why don't you list them, and then we'll ask for cooperation. We'll probably look at cooperation.
Been in prison, been flogged, exposed to death, 40 lashes, beaten with rods, touched with stones, shipwrecked 3 times, at night in the open seas, moved constantly. He had danger from rivers, danger from bandits, dangers from fellow Jews, from Gentiles, dangers in the city, danger in the country, danger at sea, danger from false believers. He's gone without food and water.
Other than that, he had a nice day.
The one thing that was really mentioned in here was that thorn in the flesh.
Yeah, as in the upcoming chapter, the next chapter, he then talks about the thorn in the flesh, of which we don't know what it was. I mean, everybody speculates. Was it visual? Was it a true thorn in the side? Was it an illness that he had? Was it epilepsy? Everybody speculates, but we don't know. We just know that he had something, and or was it a temptation that he had a hard time channeling? We don't know, but we know whatever it was is that it was a pickle for him, and he carried it with him. And what did he say about the sufferings? actually at the end of that particular chapter, the next chapter, I think the last verse, he says it very
Was it
succinctly.
where he said, in my weakness I am strong?
Yep, in my weakness I am made strong. So what is rough times for us, and it's sad when we all experience them, and when our friends and loved ones in particular experience them. But out of struggle, out of suffering, comes character, and out of character, comes commitment in alignment with God. So it isn't something we wish on anybody, but we know that God has a little bit more of a master plan than we do. But any other comments on other sufferings that Paul had? He did have a lot. So just to keep it in balance, that it's not all about prospering by earthly means, by human means. It's about really what God's plan is for us in shaping our character. We then have chapter 32. We may not get through it, but we'll give it a little bit of a college try for a read. So if we have volunteers, we'll just start at the back. Aaron, would you have your Bible open by chance? Would you start at Jennifer?
32.
Yeah, chapter 32, and then we'll just go from your right to left, and we'll end after we read through it, and we'll take out the discussion next time.
Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Methanael. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord that I may find favor in your eyes."
And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." And then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into 2 groups, thinking, if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of the steadfast love and of all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude."
So he lodged there that same night, and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every a drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass over before me, and put some distance between successive droves." And he commanded the first one, saying, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? And you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he also is behind us."
He also instructed the second, the third, and all the others who followed the herds, "You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me." So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp.
Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you, Greg. And thank you for reading. So now Jacob is coming into, the reason I wanted to read this is I had showed you earlier where Edom was. and that was at the bottom part of Israel. And you're going to see when we start our session next week and do a little review that Jacob is cutting in much earlier than that. So Esau had not moved down to that lower territory yet. He's still in where Abraham and Isaac had been. He's going back to that home country by Beersheba in southern Israel. So he's crossing over and he's thinking, boy, Esau is going to be there, and boy, is he going to be irritated when I come with all that. And I think there's one thing that stands out that's unique. Before he did his division of all of his flocks and so forth and sent them in a series, you know, as many presents for hopefully appeasing Esau, telling him that this is coming from Jacob, he's back up, he's behind. What did he do first in our narrative today?
He divided his camp into camps in case.
Just in case. Yep, no, that's right. That was the first thing he did. He divided it into camps in case Esau did attack and got vigorous. That one would at least survive. And then he did what?
He spaced out the gifts that he was sending so it looked like it was a big procession.
He did. It was impressive. I'm sure it was impressive for Esau to receive them. And then in verse 9, in the middle here, after he divided two camps, before he laid out the strategy to separate everything, who did he go to? God in prayer, which is where we'll end. So one thing nice in this message, before he laid out his mega strategy of how to present gifts, he went to God for help. And it's what we need to do as a church and what we need to do as individuals. We all say it, we all know it, but we don't always do it before we act. So anyway, let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, as you guided Jacob and Abraham and Isaac, forefathers, we ask you to guide us, and please help us be reliant on you and not on ourselves, not to look inward about what we need, about how we can prosper by our own human intent and desires, but by your plan and how you can work through us to serve the needs of others. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great week.